welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, and as ever, I have to go through the stories with me, my colleague, friend, Mahmoud Mboj. Mr. Mboj, as ever, welcome to the program.
I'm pleased to be here, Ade.
And as you'll find out throughout the program, Mr. Mboj is one of the most well-read people in the Gambia, and read, that's spelled R-E-A-D, by the way. So no jokes, please. And if you're watching this program for the first time, we go through 10 stories that we have chosen from the week just gone by, and we kick them around. Some stories we spend a bit longer on than others, but we look at the president laying the foundation stone for the new hotel that's going to be built for the OIC. We look at citizens and their obligations and their rights, citizens and the law. We look at the GCCI calling people together to talk about agricultural financing. We talk about really good program for internship at the National Assembly. All of these and lots more. So hang on, let's get kicking, shall we? The first one is His Excellency the President is about to lay the foundation stone as I speak for a huge hotel project which will be in place for the OIC summit, which will be held here in the Gambia. Here's some more about it. Have a look.
A modern 5-star hotel designed with magnificent facilities to give a fitting accommodation for guests in the much anticipated OIC summit. The foundation stone for the $100 million hotel will be laid on Saturday by President Adama Barrow with a 2-year completion target. Mvale Fadera, the OIC Gambia Secretariat's head of communications and brand, speaks to QTV about the hotel project.
This 5-star hotel project is financed through an innovative financing solution, which is a public-private partnership between the government of the Gambia and this investor concern, which is called Imolan Sal. So because of after this concession agreement was signed, a new company was created called Imogam. Imogam is the company that will own the hotel, and Imogam is co-owned by the people of the Gambia and this investing company, which is Imolan Sal.
I hope you heard that, viewers, owned by the people of the Gambia and Imolan Sal. Mr. Mboj, a huge project, unlike anything we've seen in the Gambia before.
Absolutely, and let's just put a bit of context here. Was it last week when the president visited his project sites?
Sure.
And he expressed dissatisfaction and the like.
That's correct.
So things are, things are quickening.
Sure.
One can possibly say that.
Sure.
So this is it. Laid the foundation stone
Sure.
for the hotel, which is
5-star hotel.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
which could be one of those sort of showpiece landmarks.
Without a doubt.
that sort of thing.
Sure.
And what? 2 years, we are told?
That's what we expect in terms of construction.
Yes. Then I asked the question, is that an indication of when we might be ready?
I think that it could very well be. And we have to be honest about this, I think, and it's about time that there is some sort of honesty around this. But the company leading this is, of course, Radisson Blu, who have a fantastic reputation around the world. Fantastic hotel in Sierra Leone, Radisson Blu, Mamioko, which is on Lumley Beach. And so this is not being handed over to some sort of newbies on the block. These are people who have real experience and quality service delivery everywhere they've been so far.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. Because when I looked at this Imolan Sal, I realized that it was based in Senegal, in Dakar.
That's right.
And there's a Radisson Blu in Dakar. That sort of thing.
correct.
Is of course part of this chain of hotels, as it were.
Sure.
That's it. And even the name, so that gives you the idea that perhaps they are the major partners, because once you say that there's this partnership, then of course it invites certain questions.
Like, what's this partnership split?
What are the terms of this agreement and
Yes.
the like.
But what's interesting about it is, as you've just touched on, the very point I was going to come to, which is this partnership. Because the other bit of the partnership, as we heard in the clip there, is that the people of the Gambia own the other bit. And now in other places where certainly Radisson Blu have built, the hotel has been theirs and theirs alone. And sometimes because they're bringing employment and so on, governments around the world have actually given them land free of charge. And then, they built, and of course they've ended up employing lots of people. But in this instance, I mean, it's a huge project, but it is going to be, there's a split. We don't know the split yet, because I don't think anybody's revealed it publicly. When the president lays the foundation stone, that might be mentioned, or that might be a question that is asked. There is this we have a stake in it. So it's not just somebody coming and building something on our land and say, oh, thank you for that. We have a stake still.
That's absolutely it. So this is why really we need to know,
of course,
so that we will know how to judge things.
Sure.
We, especially as journalists, how do we report on things? Gambians, we must know these terms, so we know what kind of relationship, what is the degree of ownership, as it were. So which really helps in these things. That is why communication really is key between governmental authorities and ordinary people.
Sure.
So that would be interesting, and people were even talking about beyond the conference.
Of course, because it brings in the kind of tourist experience that we don't offer at the moment. The kind of the tourism offer includes some 5-star hotels and some 4-star and some 3. But this one is built on a magnificent scale and unprecedented for the Gambia. And we can offer what we have to call high-end tourism, which we haven't been able to offer in this scale. There are a few, but not to the scale that would be possible once this is built.
Absolutely. So this is the key, the potential there, because we can only speak in terms of potential.
Sure.
Whether we actualize that potential, that's a different point. But of course, the potential is right there.
Sure.
High-end, providing high-end accommodation, the tourism industry. Absolutely. But whether we will grab the opportunity and actually do it, how many times have we said in the past that, we're very bad at management, and even the pace of the projects, as they were, the pace of work. Sure. But again, earlier on, I was just reflecting on the fact that on anything, ask people in construction, builders, everything seems to be so slow.
Indeed.
Take your car to the mechanics. I mean, when you look at the way we do things, everything seems so slow.
Yes.
Why shouldn't this be any different?
Sure.
Do you mean to tell me that a different kind of people will come and do this work?
Yes,
it's us.
But it's interesting you mentioned that point, because I guess, as we heard with His Excellency the President taking issue with the slowness of that project, calling a special meeting, perhaps this will make others who are involved in similar projects linked to the OIC to think, we don't want the President calling us in and having a special meeting and saying, you guys are moving too slow. So perhaps that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And you see, when we point out these things, we do not point them out to resign to it.
No.
We point them out to set them up as a challenge.
Absolutely.
So this is my challenge. Is really, if I'm truly into management, this is really what my challenge is. Sure. Not simply always giving the excuse, or us, how Gambians are like. Can you imagine a manager talking like that?
Well, yeah.
I'm not into that at all.
I hope a colleague of ours in the office is watching. I won't name him, except to say that he expressed similar sentiments, and even went to say that he didn't think it would be built to the scale and the standard as what was shown in the computer-generated image. And I said to him, if you look at all the other stuff that Radisson Blu have built, then believe me, it will be built to that standard. So don't lower your expectations. And I said it's for us, the citizens, because we are told we have a stake in it, to keep an eye on it and make sure that it's built to those standards.
Absolutely. So this is it. This is the challenge of whoever will be there to represent us, whatever we need to do here. This is really the challenge. So how can I be efficient, self-efficacy, as they call it? How can I set up this project and say, this time I'm going to do it? As the philosopher said, avoid the faults of your nation.
Yeah, you're quite.
I'm going to be the exception. I'm getting excited by ideas like that.
Sure. So I think we're all excited, and we're all really looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
But more than that, we will be keeping a close eye on it. So guys, you've been warned. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Now on to something completely different. In the porous border areas of the Gambia and Senegal, there's the region of Casamance, which is in southern Senegal. And it's been a troubled region, certainly since the 80s, when conflict broke out there. And in January and February of 2022, that conflict spilled over into the Gambia, and there were consequences. And amongst those who led the response were the Red Cross. And recently, they paid a visit there. Have a look.
The beneficiaries and partners of the Red Cross are gathered here to evaluate and learn lessons from the Fonyi humanitarian operation. Ibrahima Bojang is one of the beneficiaries of the humanitarian operation by the Red Cross and a village alcalde of Balen village.
Covering January 24th, in other 7,000 OD, and in 800.
In January, when the conflict broke out, I was given $7,800. The Red Cross came back to us when the conflict broke out for the second time in March. I was given another $5,250 with some materials, cooking pots, praying mats, and bed sheets. All those things were given to us.
All those things were given to us and more, Mr. Mboj. And as I mentioned in the lead up to that, there was this conflict which spilled over, as it always threatens to do. But this time, the Red Cross didn't just go there, give these things. They've now gone back to evaluate and say, did we do the right thing? Did we give the right sort of stuff? A good thing, surely.
Absolutely, and that is what any responsible organization, to me, that's what you will do. It's inbuilt, as it were. Yeah. It's organic. It's to management, if you know what I mean. Sure. So that is it. Apparently, they spent, what, 19 million?
Indeed,
you
yes.
know, helping not only the displaced, but the host families and other refugees.
23,000 people displaced, which is a lot.
A lot.
I remember I had to check the figure twice, but it's a lot of people because, it's sort of swathe of the country that was affected by this. People fled even when shells were not landed necessarily in their backyard or in their garden, but because they felt it might, and there was serious disruption.
Absolutely, and the rapid response,
well, this is
which they needed.
Yes.
So you imagine an organization like the Red Cross would have a rapid response mechanism, which really kicked in, and they tapped into. They have an emergency fund, a disaster emergency fund, which they tapped into, and went into the villages and did what they could do. The cash transfers, they supported in all sorts of ways. So now they're back there to evaluate how effective were our methods.
This is it, and what I liked about it was that they haven't sat in their offices in Banjul and Greater Banjul and ticked off some boxes. They've actually gone back and they've spoken to the people and they've interviewed them and said, this is what we gave you. Was it sufficient? And if not, why not? And so on. And so they've actually gone back to the people affected, and they're also they're assessing that, how much of a difference did the intervention make? And as we heard from that chap we heard there and others, significant difference to their lives.
Absolutely, and that is hard data.
Sure.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you must go there. You know how we give certain officials a hard time.
Yeah.
Because if you try to portray a certain picture of a situation, then we ask you, how do you know?
Exactly.
It's merely impressionistic or speculative.
Sure.
Never based on fact.
Yeah.
But this is what you need. So that next time you improve. You minimize the opportunities to make an error you've learned, and then you improve.
And that is a salient point, because when I was discussing it with our colleague Choi before he went, I said, make sure you really dig beneath the surface and ask them, I always tease him and say, ask some difficult questions. And that is exactly what they said to him. That they said that even though the feedback has been good, some of what we've heard is actually going to force us to improve. God forbid this sort of situation happens again. Even though we're getting pats on the back and told that we've done the right thing, we're not kind of resting on our laurels. We're saying that, okay, good, you've told us this. The next time we'll know we need to do X, Y, and Z. So really, really good to hear that from the Red Cross.
Absolutely, but you know that the Red Cross as an organization, where it works.
Sure.
It's a brilliant organization.
Indeed.
And then they are well fitted, well suited. This is really what they do best, as it were.
And then on a global scale, they can always refer to Red Cross headquarters in Geneva and say, we're having this situation. Have you got any advice? Have you got case studies from other places that might be similar to ours? So they can always draw on that as well, because each place is unique, obviously, but there are places that have similarities.
Even the fund, I think we got from the International Federation.
That's correct.
So, of course, they'll be getting that advice, good practice, and all the rest of it.
Okay.
So, one just only hopes that they sort of liaise with government. I think in some areas they must, certainly in certain situations they must.
That's right.
Because here, what you don't want is that the Red Cross responded, or what the government do, stuff like that. But we know that these bodies, these international bodies such as the Red Cross, they liaise with government all the time. So they could be doing that. So
because they're more suited to it than government is.
Because they are more suited to it. Even right now, what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, indeed. That's right.
The contribution of the Red Cross. But they are liaising with the government, with the EU, that sort of thing. So one expects that's the sort of thing that's here. We wouldn't necessarily go and start blaming government for
No, not at all. So thumbs up to the Red Cross, and good that you're doing this exercise. And it would be good to see the final report that they do once they've come back from Fonyi. So thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. And now on to something completely different again. In the UK, in the US, it's quite normal to have people doing internships, but it's also quite normal to have them doing internships rather, at places like the Senate, Congress, or House of Commons, House of Lords. Hey, we're about to have that here in the Gambia. Have a look.
You will get to know how the National Assembly operates, its core function, mandate, their values, and of course how it conducts its business. So, yes, your internship is for a particular period of time, but at the end of the day, the knowledge that you gain from this training would go a long way in accompanying in your various career as you may venture into after UTG, because you will get to know, because as we always say at the National Assembly, Parliament is a unique institution in the sense that you may not have the knowledge, academic knowledge to teach you how Parliament works or how Parliament operates, but you must live in Parliament, you must be in Parliament to understand.
Which raises the point there. Perhaps we should teach people how Parliament works. But Mr. Mboj, I was really thrilled by this, which is why I chose this as one of the stories. Because as I mentioned, you know, in other parts of the world, it's quite normal. And in fact, I wish I had compiled a list of the people who had once done an internship at the House of Commons who are now MPs and in some places government ministers. It's quite normal. So. He talks about their future career. Future career might be as a National Assembly member.
Absolutely. For me, when I heard internship, I said, ooh, during my day, the most famous intern was Monica Lewinsky, the political intern
at
there.
The White House.
At the White House.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Almost brought down a president.
Almost brought down a president.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely what he said there
Sure.
is true. Whether any of the interns later on would want to be National Assembly members or not.
Yeah.
The idea of in an office, as
Yes.
it were, and so administration, what does it mean to be an administrator?
This is it.
What does it mean to be a National Assembly member?
Sure.
How do we make laws?
Well, that's right.
You know, what processes
and that's why I was really thrilled about it, because, you know, we have things like Caucus Street Talk. He goes out and he asks people things that they should know, including students and you know, pupils of lower schools, you know, university students. And there are things they ought to know they don't know. And so I'm really thrilled. They'll be going there for 6 months in batches for 6 months. And in that time, they can learn quite a lot. Because, and one of the reasons why I said they might go on to become National Assembly members, we all remember in the previous parliament, Halifa Saleh correcting members in all sorts of ways. We won't go into some of them. But he was correcting them about procedure and so on. And so these are the things that this is invaluable. You know, in a way, money can't buy this kind of knowledge that you're going to gain from being an intern at the National Assembly.
Absolutely. The experience, the exposure. And then ideas will start milling about in your head, and they can change you in all subtle ways.
This is it.
You may not even notice that.
Yeah.
That is why when you are younger, when you're a student, you should be exposed to so many different situations and circumstances. It only broadens your horizon.
Yeah, indeed,
Doesn't it? So in this sense, even those who later on may not be National Assembly members or have nothing to do with the National Assembly, you know, being a clerk or even an administrative role, yet you could have learned here certain general frameworks, you know, some skills. There are certain general skills that you learn.
Yeah, and as another thumbs up, and one that, as I said, I really love it, and that's one of the reasons why I thought it's worth discussing.
Maybe many institutions we should have that.
Yes, but I'm glad you brought that up.
So absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up, because here at QTV, of course, you know, we've had interns ever since I came to QTV, and it did make me wonder when I heard about the National Assembly, and as I said, something that I very much sort of like and love the idea, but it did make me wonder how many other places offer internships where people can go and learn the ropes of what that particular sector or industry is all about.
Absolutely. When I was at QIT, sort of sometimes we would write letters to students, you know, who want to go and be interns in certain organizations. I've known few who would actually even sometimes call us. Either for internships or actually employment and stuff like that. So it depends on how proactive, I think it helps, how proactive the institution is in reaching out to potential employers.
That's
it
right.
takes a lot of work,
well, that's
but
true.
that helps in many ways.
And I'd like to see the colleges and the schools and the ministries set up a scheme whereby both employers and the schools and colleges actually come together and say, look, well, what are the opportunities for internships and work experience where people can come and shadow somebody, and really it could make a huge amount of difference, because what we find otherwise is that a lot of people who come straight from the colleges including at QTV, they've got no idea how an institution like QTV or Q Radio is run, and so it's all new to them. Yet if they'd had the internship opportunity, then they have a certain amount of knowledge about it.
Absolutely. And you realize that the problem begins in many ways from those schools. You see, they go through the system really not knowing about
it's all theoretical.
It's all
there's no opportunities for the practical of coming somewhere, doing an internship, doing a work experience.
Yes. So very few would sort of provide career counseling.
Got it.
It is through that career counseling process that you prepare them, even the careers that they choose.
Sure.
Because you remind them of what are the factors that you should take into account in deciding on a career. Sure. What are my strengths? Don't deceive yourself.
Yeah,
that in itself makes a huge difference.
Indeed it does.
And then afterwards, the idea of internship would come. So where would I go?
True.
See, this is the key, because I've identified my strengths, what I should do, so that will determine where I'm going to go for my internship, or where I would do. Sometimes anywhere you go, it's all right, in a general sense, but it's better to hone in on
what you have an interest in. Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. And before, just in closing that one, we did a story about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago now, where the university, for the first time, set up a kind of career guidance scheme, and I was horrified that they didn't have one before. So, but that goes exactly to the point you make. Thank you for that.
And mentorship.
Yes, indeed.
I think this matters so much. There should be more of that. The mentorship.
Sure.
I think that makes a huge difference. The personal contact.
Sure.
I think it's much better than just giving me papers to read or go to this site or go to that site. I think mentorship is the best in these things.
Good. Rush for that. Now, again, another interesting story. The Medicines Control Agency, they've gotten involved about some illegal activities in the medicines sale business. Have a look at this.
You're right. It was actually, I think, on the social media where someone bought a medicine that they were deliberately attempting to cover the expiry of that product. And when it came to light, of course, we did what we normally do. We will investigate and we do take the necessary actions.
We will take the necessary actions, Mr. Mboj. You and I discussed this on Drive Time. We discussed it in the office. Because one of the things that came through in that story is the fact that many people go and buy medicines, and they tend not to actually look at things like expiry dates, because there's a certain amount of trust. However, as you know, and as we know now, if anybody watched the story, somebody actually checked out a particular place to see, and this is what we found, and it was quite terrible thing is what they found, really.
Let's be honest with ourselves. Generally, we don't read. We are not really reading people, because you would see that sometimes in places you see all the signposts, yet somebody will come and ask you. Somebody will come and ask you. It's very interesting that I noticed it, because we don't really read things. We are more oral people. We like to talk. We like to ask. Something can be staring you in the face, but you feel that you just ask.
Yes, you ask nonetheless. Yes. So and with medicines, it's quite interesting and important. Because if you take a medicine that expired, the reason it's expired is it's lost its efficacy, its effectiveness. So it's not going to be effective, and there's a reason why they put a use by or sell by date. Beyond that date, don't sell it, don't use it. And yet, people go and all these terrible things happen. But this brings into our view, as it were, the Medicines Control Agency. What are their powers? What can they do? And some of the instances, or the case that we heard, the particular case, I won't name the drugstore because they've probably mended their ways now. But they were shut down for a while, a couple of weeks, and they were fined. And so this is a warning. But you raised a very important point. You said that, yes, they were fined, but what happens if after a few months they think, oh, they've forgotten about us, and they start doing those sort of bad things again, selling out-of-date medicines?
Yes, they were fined, what, 75,000? Dollars.
Yes.
How widespread is this? You know what I mean? Sure. I mean, just sort of catching one, you know, fine and using them as an example, and yes, all the rest of it, that's all good. You know, the fewer the better, obviously.
Sure.
But again, generally, what impact are we having
Sure.
on really controlling the drugs that these businesses sell to ordinary people? Sure. It's not going to be, obviously not going to be simply the MCA alone. Right. MCA's got to work with others. What about the Pharmacy Council?
Well, that's right.
We talked about.
That's right.
And others, the enforcers.
Sure.
So the structural
Sure.
problems there that also we need to tackle. Sure. You know, MCA can only work within
sure.
the circumstances.
And when we discussed this on, I think it was on This Morning, I said if anybody watching, if you can't read, but somebody sells you medicine, find somebody who can read and just ask them, say, you know, I saw this story on QTV and it was about expired medicines and so on. Could you read this for me and tell me whether this is, you know, and also to those who can read, make the offer. If you know that your neighbor can't read and you see them coming from the pharmacy saying, can I have a look at that? And just help them. And who knows, you know, you might end up helping them and possibly reporting somebody who's sold, you know, out of date medicines.
Absolutely. It will take sort of reorientation of some sort. Even those who can read really do not have the habit of reading.
Of reading. Quite.
You see,
quite,
this is really
quite.
what
if you buy medicines, and you see that,
trust.
that's right, or you see that something has been struck off, you think, oh, why have they blacked that out? And say, can I have one without it blacked out? I want to see. But you said, you're rightly saying, you know, we're not in the habit of, you know, reading these things. And part of it is because of the trust that we repose in these people that we buy medicines from. We expect them to be honest.
Possibly. All I know is just look at the name. Have we got the name right? But the small print.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, so it's important to go into the small print. And in this, really, here, the youth, can really help their parents. This is an interesting area,
sure.
because I would like to think that now a good number of youth will be able to read.
Indeed.
And it's easier for kids really to cultivate this habit. Sure. You know, old dogs and new tricks.
Quite. Yes, indeed.
This is where youth can really be radical.
Yeah, quite.
It will be helping in whatever they see their parents, grandparents, whatever medicine they buy. Sure. Talk, have the confidence.
Exactly.
It depends on the family dynamic, I suppose. But to read things and be telling my
but
family.
It's an interesting point you mentioned there, because Dr. Jar, in his Health Link, mentioned something similar. What he said is that we're now in an age where if you go back 20 years, whatever a doctor said, that was it. It was like carved in stone. He said nowadays a doctor will diagnose and the person goes and says, I've been on the internet and I found out this is, and they come back and they argue with their doctor. Perhaps we need that sort of thing, and a lot of the people doing that are young people, because you know they're sort of net savvy, and they know that they can go on the internet and they can find out certain information, including, of course, about medicines.
This is quite common in England.
Yeah, indeed.
England, America. Left, you know, they were reporting it all the time.
That's right.
And some doctors were getting worried. You know, the authority now sort of undermined. You know, these people will go and think they are doctors. Yeah, there are the dangers, of course.
Sure.
But, you know, used within reason, it helps, as it were. Sure. So this is the key. Cool. And authorities as well, the licensing, how much are we promoting good practices? Sure. How sort of vibrant, vigorous, how, you know, relentless even, as it were, in promoting these things. And then, of course, we need to always go back to the enforcement element, because they all count.
You know, does it happen? How effective is it? And how punitive are the measures that are taken for serious breaches?
Absolutely. Sure. So are we seeing the right outcomes? Just as we said earlier, we understand infrastructurally the difficulties, and the people, the attitudinal drags. Yeah. You know what I mean? One understands all of that, but still, what does that mean? Just as I said earlier, it is not to resign to do these things, then that's your challenge now, as a manager, as a head, as a leader. Now this is your challenge. This is it. Sure. What do you mean by reform and change and all of that? This is it.
Quite.
Really?
Yeah, cool. So Medicines Control Agency, keep it up, and we'll be keeping a close eye on you.
And the public as well reporting things.
So we have a role to play.
We have a role to play, always. We're reporting things. But again, when you report things, you want to see outcomes.
Of course.
You don't want to find yourself, you know, with the mindset that, oh, they will not do
They won't do
anything about it.
Yep.
See,
That's
that
the
we
worst.
constantly
That's the
do.
worst. Yeah.
So there's also a burden,
Sure.
a challenge on the side of these authorities, that when people report, respond.
Sure.
Then it will give us the incentive to go and report some more.
Totally true. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. Now on to our fifth story, which takes us to halfway through. Citizens and the law. What do we need to do to make people obey the law? You puzzled? Have a look.
Our engagement with the public showed that the public are concerned about the low level of civic education in the Gambia, apart from during election cycles. The declining levels of civic education across the country is the primary reasons citizens disobey laws, according to our interviewees. Civics is the study of the rights and obligations of citizens in society. Research shows that a proper civic education structure in a country ensures citizens understand government policies and programs and helps maintain peaceful, orderly and stable environment. Here are Sekou Dabo and Gerald O'Shea Williams giving us their take on the matter.
The law of the land is a basic right that Gambians should understand.
Law of the land, basic right that Gambians should understand, but do we? Do they? And also, it's slightly contentious, isn't it? The proposition there by our colleague Jennifer Sonko that civic education is what makes people obey the law. Is that true?
Well, let's just quoting there, saying that some studies have shown this link.
Yes, and also some of the people she spoke to.
Yes, so certainly there are links, but we are told that education, though, on its own is insufficient.
Sure, sure.
There are other things, as it were.
Yes.
The infrastructure, what they call commitment devices, you know, creating systems that would make it easier for people to do the right thing and more difficult for people to do the wrong thing. And then the enforcement element. So these are like, what they call it, isn't it, cluster solutions.
Quite.
You need so many different things really to come together to get it right.
Yeah, and after Jennifer had done the story and we had broadcast it, I then said to her, gosh, I wish I had thought of this, because I wanted to do a comparison between a country like America, which has a very sort of extensive civic education, and people disobeying the law, breaking the law, and some of the Scandinavian countries where the education is on a par with America, and yet a lot more law-abiding. And so you have these two, where you know, America, for all it goes around telling the world how to behave, when they look at themselves in the mirror, the statistics are quite shocking about people disobeying the law. Well, you even had a president disobeying the law and saying, you know, I didn't lose an election, tell people to allegedly go out and riot. You know, you're not going to tell me civic education doesn't exist or this person didn't know this, you know. So, you know, it's not always the case that, you know, if you have the education, then, you know, you're going to sort of,
Absolutely. But interesting here, whilst you were talking there, I thought sort of university at some point we did constitutional law. So I remember the lecturer asking this very interesting question. Why do people obey the law?
Yes.
Is it out of fear?
Yeah.
Certainly there's that element.
In some instances,
absolutely.
Yes.
But the more interesting one, particularly in a democracy, is the agreement. People actually agree with this law. They are committed. To it, you know what I mean? They've assimilated it. That's it. So this is where then, for us maybe, this is the crucial problem here. I am not sure if we necessarily agree with the law. I mean, the Kwame Anthony Appiah, the Ghanaian philosopher, once made this point. So these laws, the common law that sort of superimposed on the society, but our norms. Our social norms, they trump this law.
They really do. I mean, and I gave Jennifer the example of people dropping litter. I said there are laws against people dropping litter. And yet it's the most common thing you will see in the Gambia. The most common thing you'll see, I mean, dropping litter in the streets rather than in a bin. You know, that's breaking the law, essentially. Nobody's going to get prosecuted for it because it's so commonplace and because we disregard you know, the laws that exist because we know nobody's going to do anything to us.
So this basic sort of embedding So whatever comes, we interpret against that embedding. That's why there's so many social habits are really very, very difficult to change.
Indeed.
Yet, we in the media, we will keep on talking
we have to bang on
this.
about it.
We have to bang on about this. Sure. They go to schools, they will bang on about it. What does it mean to be a modern society?
Sure.
This is really what it means.
Sure.
Everywhere you go, you have this social tension.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere you go.
Sure.
So we are not all like one thing or all like another. It's a mixture.
Sure.
Some are for this, against that. We are that complex society. So,
but I like your idea that these things work because everybody agrees.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us nicely to the halfway point, or in terms of stories anyway. Don't go away. Join us after this break.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, the Gambia's trusted network.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review with me, Ade Darami, and my co-host, Mr. Momodu Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for some very interesting interventions so far. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And now on to our sixth story. The GCCI, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, has been holding a series of meetings which have been really quite interesting, bringing people from different sectors together. And recently they brought together people from the agricultural sector and the finance sector. What do they have in common? Have a look.
GCCI's role in the project includes providing support for the implementation of the partnership arrangement by assisting SMEs and farm organizations to have discussion with financial institutions on getting access to credit and rural financial services, and to facilitate the signing and execution of supply contracts on the resilience of organizations for transformative smallholder agriculture project routes. Babukar Saho, Director, Business Development and Program, GCCI, said the meeting is just the beginning of a series of engagements.
Just the beginning of a series of engagements, Mr. Mboj. And what was about this, which I particularly liked, was that they mentioned in terms of agriculture, this Roots project, which was mentioned there. Mm-hmm. There's a funding gap of 20.6 million. But the GCCI have brought together people who are engaged in the industry and say, you might be in farming or you might be in agriculture, but there are certain things that you're not aware of that you could take advantage of. We can help. A brilliant initiative, surely.
Absolutely. The facilitators. Quite. This is an interesting idea. And recently, there's been a lot of talk, about PPIs.
Indeed.
Because of what the Q group has just done
with the buses,
and
now with the hotel. That's a kind of PPI as well.
And the hotel as well, PPI. Yeah. And for long we've been talking about private sector. And here the private sector is not very popular. It appears to be a kind of bête noire to certain doctrinaire minds that think that private sector, they're here only to make their profits. Sure. The situation is much subtler. Yeah. It's much subtler.
More
that.
nuanced.
It's much more nuanced. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
So this is it. So for a long time, we always talk about private sector being the engine of growth.
Yeah, sure.
But we've never really walked the talk.
Yeah, indeed.
So, but recently one gets the sense that private sector is sort of coming into it more.
Sure.
There's something about the GCCI as well.
Well, this is
They've been very active.
They have been, and when you look at the numbers in terms of percentage of the population that are involved in farming, in agriculture, now we're talking about some of them being SMEs, small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises. But you have the GCCI saying that in certain instances you might be good at farming, you might not be good at contracts. We can help you with that. you might not be good at going for loans, accessing finance. We can help you with that. And so they're not just kind of theorizing about it. They're bringing the people in the sector and the people from the financial institutions together and say, what do you need? And this one is asking, what can you offer? And so, you know, they're trying to bring them together, and they're saying that we will be the kind of middle people and we can help. We can help facilitate this to make that thrust, that leap that needs to be made in order for this to be meaningful in sort of increasing productivity, increasing how you market your product and so on. They're offering all of that help.
Absolutely. The grand, you know, normally you have the grand inquisitor here, they will be the grand facilitator.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
as it were. And not long ago, we did a story on drive time. 2 reports went to some rural areas and realized that all the youth were gone. You only got the elderly now who are doing the farming. So the effect on productivity. So that is a window to really the problems out there.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So this is it with GCCI, this initiative coming up with this. Perhaps we are creating avenues to solve you know, some of these issues, these problems that are emerging.
Yeah, and it's a big problem here.
Absolutely. Private sector involvement, you know, being led, driven by GCCI and that sort of thing. You know, I'm a private sector guy. Absolutely.
Good. Engine for growth.
Engine for growth.
That will be our phrase for the year. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And now on to something else, technical and vocational education and training, TVET. There's been a lot happening, but do you know that there's a national TVET policy? You didn't know? Well, now you do know, and here's some more about it. Have a look.
The TVET committee comprises 45 members from various public and private tertiary and higher education institutions, government sectors and international partners to have diverse views in support of the program. In his welcoming remarks, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, Dr. Yusuf Toure, highlighted the significant role of the committee towards the development of a master plan that will guide the implementation of the national TVET policy.
A plan or a master plan, Mr. Mboj. I like the fact they call it a master plan rather than just a plan or a strategy. But what they're saying is that they formed this committee which will oversee the implementation and the coordination so that these TVET schemes are happening all over the place and they're not on focus. It's going to bring them all together to work towards a national policy around TVET. Surely this has been long overdue.
Oh boy, they've been working on this for a while. I remember when I was at QIT, NACA, the National Accreditation and Quality Assurance Authority, we was trying to harmonize, as it were, the tertiary education, as it were, all these different subjects you teach in that area. So I think for a long time you've had different institutions doing different things. So maybe now you've got, you know, the master plan. Perhaps hence the term the master plan, because all these different units, you've collated them and put them in a sort of grand report.
And coordinate them and
focus them. Maybe this is what they're talking about.
Because we keep hearing about, you know, unskilled youth. And of course that will always continue. If there isn't some sort of policy to say, look, even when you and I were in school, there were people who they were good with their hands, they weren't good with, you know, anything else, but there were no avenues for them. And so now there are avenues. Okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a mechanic? Do you want to do this? You know, structured in a structured way. And who knows? You know, as one of them said in the interview, you know, I want to learn the skill. I can be master of my own destiny, and I like that. You know, and so you know, these are some of the benefits that will come out of a coordinated, structured policy.
Absolutely, and it helps in many other areas because for every level of work, be it apprenticeships and any level of work, any kind of work, they've got standards. Yes, so they were trying to find ways of trying to certify everybody. You know, everybody's certifiable. You know, you don't have to go to school. How do we reach out? Especially when you go to car mechanics, the car mechanics shop, you see all these kids, they're all apprentices. How do you bring structure into that sort of thing? That was really where NACA was focused on.
Well, this is it, because if I go to a mechanic and I see you advertising that all of my mechanics have been certified, I'm more likely to go to you than to the
likely
other
to
guy
go to you.
whose mechanics are not certified.
So it has to recognize that and try to bring structure into it. So as I said, they've been working on the policy, national tibet policy for a while now. So this is the the fruit of
all those labors.
All those labors.
Let's hope they get it right. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us now on to our 8th story. Believe it or not, there was a time, I was very young, and I wanted to join the army. And my parents talked me out of it. And recently, the army has been engaging the media. Why would they want to do such a thing? Have a look and find out.
There is also a need for reasonable disclosure, so that those whom we serve are also aware that what we do is purely to ensure their safety and security. National security issues are issues which probably are not written anywhere, but there is a common understanding that the press will not put forward any information that may be detrimental to national security.
I smile. Where to start with this one, Mr. Mboj? Suffice to say, there are contrasting views as to whether the army should engage with the media, and even cynicism about why they're doing it. So if I come straight to the point, what's your view on this?
No, when we discussed it the last time, I think that sort of I was a bit unfair, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Okay, yes. We need to mend fences.
Sure.
Essentially, that's what's going on here because of what happened before. We need to mend fences. Yes, it's important that we have this dialogue, we talk on all of that. But we've always known that there might be some tension between security forces and the media.
Sure.
For a long time, especially in conditions of war or conflict, the embedding.
Well, indeed.
Yes. People have been I'm talking about that, or even the visuals that we show, how we report, how would that change public opinion. So there are all sorts of things. There are security issues and our safety, granted.
Sure.
But still, I've got a problem of balance,
Sure.
objectivity,
Sure.
factual reporting of events and situations.
Yes.
So sometimes what you don't want me to show, well, to me, it's newsworthy. So that security element, I'm not sure whether we'll be agreeing all the time.
Yes, in case anybody goes online and looks at the agenda and for the event, they'll see my name there. Unfortunately, work commitments meant I couldn't go. But one of the things I was going to talk about was I was going to give an example of what happened. We mentioned Casamance in an earlier context in terms of the Red Cross. But there was an instance when some Senegalese soldiers had been captured. And unbeknownst to our army, some of the media went there. And the way they reported it, as a journalist, I was horrified. There was no objectivity. They completely believed everything the separatists said. And they actually were putting themselves in harm's way. In a way where if they'd spoken to the army, they would have possibly been dissuaded. But they all saw it as an opportunity to get a story and so on. And it showed up how little sort of experience there had been of teaching people how to report on security situations. And that's one of the examples I was going to use had I given my talk about how the responsibility that the media has in reporting these things. Nobody's saying don't go and report, but there are certain responsibilities that fall upon you as media to actually be very careful about how you, I mean, like I said, I remember watching it and being horrified when people were saying, interviewing the separatist leader and saying, gosh, I really like what he had to say. He was talking a lot of sense there. Listen, even if you thought it, you shouldn't voice it. But that came out in the reports. And so that was one of the reasons why I had agreed to go. And as I said, unfortunately, I didn't go. But, there are instances, but I get the point that, there are suspicions about why, but there is a need to mend fences, but there's also a need to report responsibly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes, when we discussed that, so we all said that there were certain journalistic failures.
Sure.
That was pretty clear. So that wasn't only to do with the security situation. That was just journalism, letting its guard down, being driven by emotion or affection.
And social media tweets and so on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
As journalists, we must go and really learn our craft.
Sure. Sure.
Let's educate ourselves first before we go out to make certain judgments, certain evaluations. Every report really is a kind of judgment.
Indeed.
That is why I take any event, send 5 different reporters, you'll get 5 different stories.
Sure.
Same event.
Sure.
So the individual, you must reflect on what you're doing.
Sure.
Really, knowing that objectivity, factual reporting, it's got nothing to do with your emotions at all. It's almost as if these are external things, as it were. It's got nothing to do with me. They're external things.
That's right.
So that's it. Before we go around judging, let us learn.
Sure.
So I will take that from the army. They're absolutely correct.
Sure.
I have to educate myself first.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. We don't have much time, but we have 2 more stories to go and a couple of interesting ones still. Next up, pesticides on food projects. No, it's not the same story, but it's linked to the same story that we covered previously. Confused? You won't be when you see this. Have a look.
The implication is that pesticides, they are not to be used on fish. Pesticides are meant to be used on plants. We are told now that there is evidence that they have been used on fish. So that's a very serious matter, because it means that now it is possible for consumers to buy fish which contains pesticides. Yeah, that's a very serious matter.
Even the use of pesticides on plants has safety guidelines for farmers and consumers. Fish processors are likely to cause harm to consumers.
There we heard Choi, but we also heard before him a food safety expert. And one of the things, and we can dance around this, that he exposed was that if we're serious about dealing with these things, we need to have the facilities. In the case of the sniped fish, as one of our colleagues had saved the story, the sniped fish had to be sent to Senegal to be tested. If we are serious about food safety and protecting the public, we need to have our own laboratories. And this is not us beating up on government or anything like that. It's just saying that we need to get real. Otherwise, people will question how serious we are. Sure.
Absolutely. There's that bit. We need to get the laboratory so that we can do the tests to get the science. And again, there must be the engagement with these vendors.
Sure.
Why are they using it? What alternatives can there be?
Sure.
Here, CSOs, anybody can really get involved in this sort of things. So it's not, as we said earlier, when it comes to these social issues, it's rarely that you just got to do one thing or 2 things. That's why they are difficult. Multifaceted, multidimensional. There are so many things I need to do so that I'll get the right outcomes. It's as difficult as the things are. This is what is. So we must engage with that. Can we provide them with alternatives?
Sure.
What is the reason for doing it?
Sure.
What advantages do they think that they are benefiting as
and we
by
talked
doing
about,
it?
We talked about private sector. The ones who sell to us, the consumer, are the private sector. Is there a space for the private sector to come in and fund something like this? Because of course they're the ones who have to have confidence, inspire confidence in the public and in consumers. Surely they have a role to play also in funding something like this.
That is why these trades, certain professions, I don't like force. I'm a free marketeer, but I feel that given our situation, they all must be forced to join associations.
Sure.
That is the institutional engagement. Otherwise, it's not organized.
Right.
You'll just sit until there's a problem, then you go and protest.
Sure.
What about a more constructive engagement? Without the association, you cannot have the constructive engagement with the state, which you want. If I could, all of these trades, anybody, before you move anywhere, you are going to be part of an association. It may sound socialist, Cuba style stuff, but they know how to organize society, even a Chinese style stuff. But they know how to organize society.
I'll have to stop you there. So beware, everybody, when Mr. Mboj becomes Minister for Trade, you'll be forced to join one of these associations. And now onto our final story. It's a quick one. We won't spend much time on it. But a Gambian young man, Alassane Anne, recently won a bronze medal. Where? At the taekwondo championships in Kigali, Rwanda. Have a quick look.
Despite being in the US, Alassane cherishes his nation, saying he wants to compete to put the Gambia on the sporting map. Alassane will now continue his training in Minnesota, the United States of America, ahead of the Islamic Solidarity Games in Konya, Turkey in August.
Yes, luckily now we have been preparing and prepping for the Islamic Games, and that's the next goal right there, is to continue to make history again and push forward and show, and just to be honest, just not even show, but put Gambia on the map once again.
Now, I said we don't have much time on this one, but I will start by a mea culpa, admitting something. After we had done the story, I thought, let me go back and look at this young man and his record. Mr. Mboj, this chap had represented America to the highest levels before he decided to switch to the country of his parents' birth. Absolutely. Really impressive, and you don't have to take my word for it. Go online, his records online there. So really, really pleased. And the reason I wanted the story is because we need many more young people like this who are willing to represent their home country, who have the opportunity to represent these bigger nations. And it wasn't that the Americans kicked him out. He chose to represent the Gambia.
That's it. It makes it special.
Indeed.
Doesn't it? The decision, it makes it so selfless.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Indeed. Fantastic. Yes. African Taekwondo Championships.
Yes.
To go there and take bronze.
Yes.
Any championship, any competition.
Sure.
Any competition.
And this one was
really
huge, by the way.
Yeah.
Go online and you'll see the videos and you'll see the pictures. It was massive. The place was packed out in Kigali, Rwanda.
That's it.
Sure.
To get up there on the podium.
Sure.
And receive a medal. Fantastic.
Fantastic. And that brings us nicely, succinctly to the end of the program. And all I can say, Mr. Mboj, thank you for your interventions.
Pleasure.
And as ever, to the viewers, thank you for watching. Until next week, goodbye.